In this video, we're gonna do completing the square again, but I just kind of wanna show you just a little trick. So, well, it's not a trick, I'm just wanna prove to you. So usually if we look at this, then I'd look for two numbers. If I multiply them, I have to get to -6. And if I add those numbers, I have to get to, in this case, to a +4. And that's kind of the method we followed. We know if we can't find those numbers, we say, oh, they don't exist. So then we go to the square root option. But I kind of wanted, well, not square root, the complete the square option. But I wanted to show that if we were to complete the square and we get our 2x answers, if we actually multiply those two numbers, we are going to get to -6. But the numbers are just very weird for us to think about. So yes, this might just, it's a bit of a theory lesson, I guess. But we can use it as practice just to say, hey, pause the video now, check if you can complete the square. Okay, so we have x squared plus 4x, and the +6 I'm taking over. So, well, the -6 I'm taking over, so that becomes +6. And to complete the square here, I have to add, well, 4 divided by 2 is 2, times itself would be 4. So I'm adding a 4 on both sides. Here, this is a complete square, x plus 2 squared. And here, that would be 10. And if I took the square root on both sides, let's just write that in. I have to know, because this is a quadratic, I'm going to have two answers. So in this case, I have x plus 2, because those two cancel each other out. And here I have plus or minus the square root of 10. Well, maybe I can just write the 10 a little bit better. I can move this over or subtract 2 on both sides. So I'm left with -2 plus or minus the square root of 10. I know the plus or minus might be confusing, but let's just split that up so that we see what our two answers are. So x, I'll write it here, x can either be -2 plus the square root of 10. Again, this is an irrational number. We can type it in our calculator and have a very big number, but we'll just write it in the exact form there. And so if I wanted to draw this, I'll probably use the calculator. Let me do that now. Let's say if I wanted to have an actual value for it, I could say, okay, so what's square root of 10? And then I take off 2, and then x would be 1.16. If I had to do 3 significant figures there. So this is one option, but it's a repetitive option, okay? Well, it's an irrational number. And here I can do -2. I already used the plus, so I'm going to say minus the square root of 10. So if I did 10 square root and I minus 2 of that, then what did I do? Oh, I needed to add it to the other side. Sorry. That was a -10. So let's say negative. Oh my goodness. So that's actually a minus number, but I have a very, very silly calculator, so I can't do the negative bit in here. But just assume that is -3, and then -2, that would be -5.16 something. Now, if I were to multiply these two numbers, I would actually get to -6. But I'm not going to use my calculator, because my calculator isn't good enough for that, so we'll do it hand method. So let me just take out this part. So if I'm going to do it in a long way, so -2 plus the square root of 10 times -2 negative square root of 10. If I multiply these two things, just move this a little bit up, I'd get negative times negative, 2 times 2 is 4. This, if I multiply this and that, I would get -2 the square root of 10. If I multiplied that and that, I would get +2 times the square root of 10. And last, I would have a negative, and the square root of 10 times the square root of 10, that kind of just becomes 10. And this part and this part would cancel each other out, so I'm left with 4 minus 10, and that would be -6. So the two numbers did exist. They are there, but there's no way you or I, well, maybe you can, but I definitely can't think of this number just by looking at this 6 and this 4 and say, oh yeah, sure, obviously, and -2 times, well, -2 negative the square root of 10, that's obviously going to be the answers here. So we do the kind of completing the square bit so that we can get to these answers. And if we wanted to draw them, then I don't want to get ahead of myself, but then we would use these actual values.